What is it really like being retired at 35? This is what Liquid will share today.
Fellow investors, bonjour! This is Mike Leroux, founder of Dividend Stocks Rocks and passionate investor. You're listening to the Dividend Guy Blog podcast, where I and my co-host Veronique will help you invest with more conviction so you can enjoy your retirement.
Dividend growth investors, bonjour, Vero here, and you're listening to the Dividend Guy Blog podcast. I'm thrilled today because I'm receiving Liquid. Liquid was one of our first guests on the show back in 2022. Back then, Mike did the interview, and I remember how impressed I was by his mental models and how he was about to reach fire at only 35. So I thought it'd be great to follow up with him and see what he's up to. So welcome again, Liquid. How are you today?
Hi, Vero. Thank you for having me back on. I'm doing well. I'm just looking at the market, the financial markets today, and then seeing what kind of trades I can make. But yeah, overall, doing well.
Well, Liquid, you started working in 20, not in 20, actually in 2008 and retired in 2022. So first of all, congrats on reaching financial independence in and
Thank you.
retirement in only 14 years. Like that's pretty much impressive. But what other interesting facts could describe you for those who don't know you?
For those who don't know me, the best way to describe myself is I am an INTJ. So I'm introverted and I tend to like to keep to myself. And I'm also into like analyzing things, which a lot of the fire community seems to be. There's a disproportional amount of people who retire early and want to reach financial independence who are like myself.
I never did that questionnaire, so I guess I should.
Oh, the Myers-Briggs personality.
Yes, maybe I'm a fire hidden melody somewhere.
Yeah, maybe there's actually quite a lot of personality types within the Myers-Briggs. There's ENTJ as well, which are also pretty suitable for becoming fire, I guess.
So I should check this out. In 2022, your retirement plan was to enjoy life as it goes and take care of the baby on the way. I know what it's like to have kids. I have three of my own. So I'm curious how it has evolved since then.
Yeah, well, as I'm sure you know, having kids is like a full-time job already. So since the previous interview we did, yep, we had a baby boy and he's 2.5 now.
Hmm.
So quite a handful, but I'm just spending most of my time with him right now. And, because I don't have a job anymore, so there's no set schedule, it just feels like all the days are blending together and my weekends and weekdays, it just feels the same.
So pretty much the plan is still the same. You just enjoy life as it goes and take care of your son and stay at home pretty much, right?
Yeah, it actually feels like a very long vacation that I went on and then I never returned to work. I've actually had a similar experience during my career, my eighth or ninth year into my graphic design job, where I went on a 2 month sabbatical.
Uh-huh.
And I say 2 months, but it felt like it was nothing because I was just doing like everything I wanted to do. I slept in like every day pretty much, and it was just a great time to have, but it went by so quickly that I kind of miss it. And I wanted, which also gave me the motivation to reach fire early because I wanted that again, where I had all the time to myself and I could dictate exactly what I wanted to do. So
Mhm.
even though it's been since our last interview, I guess about 2.5 years, almost 3 years,
Mhm.
it it just doesn't feel that long. Like it feels
Right.
like months has gone by, and it's been great. But also there are issues as well because I find that without a set schedule and external pressure, there's sort of like a lack of motivation to get anything done.
I see. Right. And have you developed any passions or hobbies since you retired?
Yeah, so I had a graphic design career before,
Hmm.
so I'm really into art and creative things. So to find something to do, I decided to go back into drawing again. So I'm into drawing with colored pencils right now and just teaching. Also, I want to teach our toddler how to draw as well. So yeah, that's going well. That's fun.
I like drawing. I'm not that talented, but I like to do drawings at times with my daughter, and like professional people are, I'm so impressed by what they can do. Like it can take hours and hours to finish one drawing, right? So I'm not sure if it's your case, but it's so
Yeah,
impressive. It looks like a picture sometimes.
yeah, you need a lot of patience for sure,
Mhm.
but it's really rewarding, I think.
And at Dividend Stocks Rock, we have many retirees as members, and a lot of them end up going back to work or, volunteering somewhere because they feel like they lack a sense of purpose at one time. So, how do you keep yourself
Hmm.
busy and how do you get that sense of purpose?
Yeah, I've actually been fortunate to never had a sense of not having a purpose because like even during my career while I was working, I had a lot of hobbies that I can always like go back to and
Hmm.
things I wanted to do over the weekend. So I've just been doing those things right now, like
All the
watching
time.
movies, reading, yeah, like all the time, going out for walks. Right now I'm spending a lot of time with family and
Hmm.
with the toddler. So that's going really well. But I do resonate with the fire community you mentioned where they mentioned that they find a lack of motivation to
Hmm.
do anything, and I think that's been like the primary problem I've had over the last couple of years. I guess it's not so much that I don't have the motivation to do things, it's that I'm very motivated to not do things. I think laziness is one of those things where it's a really easy habit to get into, and you have to be mindful of that because
Hmm.
with everything the way as it is right now, and I guess I have to preface this by saying that I know that every complaint I have, every problem is going to be a very privileged problem.
Right.
So I understand that, people are willing to save 30, 40, 50% of their income. They're willing to forego instant gratification and, sacrifice all of that just so they can reach fire and have the same problems I have. So having said that, yeah, I understand that because I don't have, a boss telling me what to do, I don't have a bus I have to catch in the morning, I can sleep in, and all of this stuff. It just, I guess it's the reptile part of my brain that's saying, like, why would you do work when you can just, like, sit back, have a cocktail,
Hmm.
watch TV, right? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I do, if I work or if I don't work, or if I go out or if I stay home.
Hmm.
The next day, my life is going to be exactly the same.
Right.
I'm not in a place where I need to work to make money for survival. So I guess that's why we have the stereotypical, like when people go on vacation, like when we think of a relaxing time, it's sitting on the beach, sipping a Mai Tai and just like enjoying the weather.
Hmm.
It is because by default, at least for me, I think I'm a lazy person in general. So when I don't have to do anything, that's what I default to. And it is a problem because I do want to be productive. And right now I'm not feeling like I'm doing anything productive.
Hmm. So you still think that it might change over time, that you might find like motivation at some point to do something else, right?
Yeah, I think right now because I'm focused on our toddler
Right.
and just playing with him, I spend a lot of time with him. But I think after he goes to school, like starts primary school, maybe around age 5, then I will have a lot more time. It'll be like before we had him, just my wife and I. So I think at that time I might find some motivation to go do something, either a part-time
Hmm.
job or maybe freelancing or maybe it could be something completely different that I'm not aware of yet because one thing I consider I could do is just teach drawing or teach art
Hmm.
or make tutorials, put those videos online, something like that, something creative that I can enjoy. It doesn't have to make a ton of money, but as long as I find it useful, purposeful, helpful for others, and meaningful to myself.
Right. And you know what? You make me think a bit of my brother-in-law, Alex. So, hello, Alex.
Hmm.
He's having his fourth child in a couple of months, but he has been working like high-level job for a few years, and then he was able to put a lot of money aside. And now he's working only 2 days. He worked like 1 or 2 years, took like 1 year and a half, I believe, of break, then went back to work. He's doing like
Mm,
all of this I'm working for a bit, then I'm taking a long break. Now he works 2 days a week and he's spending all the rest of the time with his family. So is this something that you envision doing, thinking about your retirement budget and balancing that with family expenses? Because I mean, your expenses will probably grow in time, right? With a kid.
Hmm.
So is that something also that you're thinking about?
Yeah, we've actually had a little bit of experience, a little bit of that like growing expenses you mentioned
Hmm.
right after I quit my job. This was like in later 2022 because again, I got lazy and I actually did something which is very bad in the financial independence community, which is not track my spending anymore. So that was a mistake because lifestyle inflation crept in.
Mm,
We thought, we're okay, we don't have to work now. We just got a new baby. So let's, pamper ourselves a little bit as new parents. We don't want to, get stressed out and work too hard. And we not only spent more money that year, like during the year 2022 to 2023, but also our income, of course, got a lot less because both of us stopped working. And when I checked back on my financial expenses a year later, we were very negative in terms of net
mm,
worth, down almost six figures,
wow.
which was not what I was expecting. And it was quite a shock because up until that point, our net worth was going up every single year, like for the past 10 plus years. So having it go down, not only just go down for the first year, but go down so much was really unexpected and was like a wake up call that, hey, I have to get back to looking at my expenses, tracking my finances, tracking what's coming in, what's going out,
Hmm.
and maybe going back to my old habits a little bit because this current method of just ignoring your finances
Hmm.
is not working out for us. So I do expect one of us, at least maybe one of us, to do some kind of part time work in the future to kind of balance out that budget so that we're at least break even. Because right now we're still cash flow negative, like even though interest rates have come down a little bit. But yeah, I don't think this is sustainable if we keep spending the way we were spending.
Hmm.
So we're cutting back to what we were spending previously. And like I said, in the future, like a couple years later, maybe I'll find some work or my wife will. She's actually, because she's self employed,
Hmm.
so she's actually getting back into doing a little bit of a part time work
All right.
herself.
I see. Good.
Hey, dividend growth investors, this is Vero. Mike is currently taking a sip of water, which gives us 10 seconds, and I literally mean 10 seconds to grow the podcast together. Go on Spotify or Apple Podcast, hit pause, and then under our logo, you'll see two very interesting buttons. One to subscribe, hit that subscribe button now, and then give us a 5-star rating. Our goal is to help more investors just like you, so please spread the love. Thank you.
Okay, so let's dive into the struggles maybe that you faced since being fired. Which are the
Hmm.
ones that you like pretty much slapped you in the face that you did not expect?
Yeah, well, definitely the biggest slap came right after we retired. And like I mentioned in 2022,
Hmm.
we were kind of hit with this double whammy of really bad financial situations. So, first thing is the stock market went down in 2022. So, our assets, like the money we had in the stock market, went down. So, that was not good for our net worth, both in the US and Canada, which most of our stocks are in.
Hmm.
They all went down. But the second thing, and it's probably the biggest factor that I wasn't expecting, which hit our finances very heavily, was that interest rates went up. And that was because inflation went up. And if we had a fixed rate mortgage, that would have been fine. The problem was we had not only like a variable rate mortgage where the interest rate went up and down, but we had an adjustable rate mortgage with Scotiabank, which is very unlucky because that's one of the few banks in Canada that has this program
Hmm.
that we managed to get. But what that means is our mortgage payment went up and down with interest rates. So our mortgage was not small to begin with, around $4,000 a month.
Hmm.
This was prior to interest rates going up. When rates went up from like nothing to 5%, our payment almost doubled and went over $7,000 a month
Wow.
just in mortgage payment. So
That's a lot.
you can imagine, yeah, you can imagine over the course of a year how much of a dent that put into
Mm.
our cash flow, right? Our net worth. So that's why I mentioned during the first year of retirement when I wasn't paying attention. And then I looked back and I saw that we're down so much. So that was definitely one of the struggles that we had to deal with
Hmm.
and wrapping our minds around it because it's not something that I'm used to. So it's more of an adjustment in your head more than anything else because it's like how some people like never take on debt. They're very debt adverse and maybe finally they buy a home and they have like a $300,000 mortgage or something. To them, it's a very big deal,
Hmm.
but to someone else it might be like that's nothing,
Hmm.
right? So it's all like very personal when you're talking about these sorts of things.
Right.
So for me, who has never had a negative net worth year, who's always had increasing income, now is like decreasing income and also negative net worth and by quite a lot. So I had to kind of almost like reprogram myself to think larger, step back and look at the bigger
Hmm.
perspective, which is that, okay, like even though this is really bad and I lost a lot of money, at the end of the day, looking at the bigger picture, I'm still better off. My situation is better off today than I was 5 years ago. So I had to keep things into perspective and also make a plan for the future and continue to be optimistic because, like I mentioned earlier, this is a very like a first world problem thing to have. And the reality is my wife and I are both working age, able bodied, and we could go back to work if we wanted to in the future.
Hmm.
So it's not a long term issue. It was just very shocking at the time.
Right. But still, I'm kind of impressed that instead of like panicking and feeling like distress, you just like sit back and started thinking like, okay, so what are we gonna do now? That's pretty much what you did. I mean, maybe you had a panicking moment, but it didn't last, right?
Yeah, I was very panicked, probably more nervous than I had been in a very long time.
Hmm.
But I guess my ego kind of prevented me from going back to work because I'm like, well, no, I retired. So if I go back to work now, then all of my financial independence work and effort
Right.
previously would have been a failure then. But the other thing is I really wanted to see, because I treated this whole thing as an experiment,
Hmm.
and I wanted to see what happens if I didn't go back to work because even though I was in a not ideal financial situation, I wanted things to play out. I wanted to see where interest rates would go, how my budget would change maybe over the next couple of years. And if this was going to be a success or a failure, then I wanted to see it till the end
Hmm.
and not try to change my plan like in the middle of it.
Right. Okay, so during the first interview, you told listeners to be careful what they expose themselves to, which included friends. So I was curious to know,
Yes.
did you have to make new friends as a young retiree, or maybe connect yourself to a new environment because it can feel like a lonely path, right?
Yeah. Well, luckily for me, for those who know introverts, I don't need to
Right.
have a lot of socialization
That's a good
and to
point.
have a lot of friends to be happy and to be fulfilled and everything. So I've actually stepped back from society in a way where I've lost touch with a lot of friends and acquaintances, especially the online community. I was using X a lot
Hmm.
a few years ago. It was helping me with my blog, and I really liked the rapport and talking with people online, learning about different financial aspects. But since retirement, I've just completely stepped back from that. And well, not tracking my finances and not updating my budget also kind of played into that because I would usually on my blog, update people and
Hmm.
talk about my finances. But because I haven't been updating my own finances, I can't really talk about it. So I can't share that with people. And there was really just no motivation to stay on social media.
Hmm.
Plus, in real life, it's not that I've stopped seeing like my friends. I'm just seeing them less now.
Hmm.
And it's usually them who contact me and say like, "Hey, Liquid, you want to go out for like lunch or something?" And then I'll say, "Yeah, like I'll go," but I'm not actively reaching out to them.
Hmm. Okay, and the first time you appeared on the podcast, you explained that you started with real estate using leverage. Considering inflation, like you've mentioned, and higher interest rates, would you say this strategy still works today?
Yes, but with a caveat in that real estate is very local. and it's really personalized. So I think back when we did the previous podcast, I would suggest people listen to that again because I went into detail about like when to buy real estate, when to buy stocks. And back then, I don't think it was a good time. But right now, the sales to listing ratio, depending on what you're buying, for detached homes, for example, in Vancouver, I think is a pretty good time because it's almost pretty much a buyer's market.
Mm-hmm.
If not, then I don't think it would be a good time. So that's I think it's a very nuanced question to answer.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on the type of home you're buying, the neighborhood, and of course, like which city. But in terms of like interest rates, where that's going, I think it's a good time to buy right now.
By the way, listeners, I'm going to put the link to the first interview in the show notes for sure because I'm keeping on referring to it. But I mean, I had to listen to it again because I found it so interesting and it was just a great inspiration for all my questions today. So definitely it's like part one and two here. Okay, so
Mhm.
Liquid, if you had to do it again today, like reaching fire, how would you start?
Well, there is the simple answer, right? Of like just buy whatever stock, Nvidia, like buy Bitcoin. But if I didn't know what was going to happen with any assets, any investments, and I only had the knowledge of what I have today in terms of just personal experience, I would still say like just to try to improve yourself is where I would start. Human capital is the best resource, is the best asset in the long run. Nobody can take that away from you. But other than that, look at long term history and see what asset classes are doing well, save money and buy those. So historically, it has been the real estate market and it has been the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
So I would start in those places.
So I remember that using leverage was a big part of your mindset. And you mentioned, like you just mentioned, sorry, you mentioned the different types of leverage back then, like expertise, technology, knowledge, and money. Do you currently use leverage?
Yeah, the leverage that I've put in place, the financial leverage, borrowing money to invest, to buy real estate, stocks, those are still in place that I had before.
Hmm.
So those haven't really changed. And I haven't really applied any new leverage in my life at this point, but I can see maybe with technology and expertise, I can leverage that again.
Hmm.
So, like if I start another YouTube channel, I can maybe teach, kids how to draw. So that would be leveraging the power of the internet
Hmm.
and also leveraging the experience that I've had as an artist.
Let me know if you launch that YouTube channel. I'll
Yeah, for
probably
sure.
have like one or two interested here. Okay, so about using leverage with technology, AI has been like in everyone's mouth for a few years now. What are your thoughts on it? I'm curious to know about that. Can AI help people reach their goals?
Yes, I think AI can definitely help. I think AI is here to stay. What that's going to look like in 10 years is very hard to say, but I think definitely keep an eye out for it. Not only is it going to help people, because I see a lot of people use it for work,
Hmm.
for their schoolwork as well, to do homework. But I also think more importantly, keeping up with new technology, which right now happens to be AI, is also good for protecting ourselves against fraudulent activities and scams and things like that. I'm not sure if you've seen the Brad Pitt scam
No?
recently, where this lady in France thought she was dating Brad Pitt and transferred him like $800,000 before she realized that she had been duped. And so basically, these scammers were using AI generated images
Mm,
of Brad Pitt, which is really sad, this story, but at the same time, it's funny to me because if you looked at the pictures that they leaked online,
hmm.
you could tell that they're AI generated. So, I mean, there's this one picture of like him in the operating room, and the angle is just like really off.
Hmm.
But I think it's like stories like this that get me thinking because AI can be used for good or for nefarious reasons, and we have to understand it to protect ourselves. Because right now, who gets scammed the most usually are older people.
Hmm.
So right now you can there's technology right now where you can point the camera phone to yourself and your facial expressions and your mouth movements will be overlaid onto this other person's face. So you can like FaceTime somebody and you can be like the president or you can be like whatever celebrity and it'll look like that and when you talk it'll sound like that as well. So it's really easy to get duped if you don't know what you're looking at.
Right.
But yeah, definitely in terms of how it can help us going forward, I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like, but I think it is important to pay attention to this space, look at what experts are talking about,
Hmm.
and you know, even using the like chat GPT, if it can help you with your everyday work, I'd say go for it and just slowly get yourself exposed to, this whole industry and see where it goes from here. Keep an eye on it for sure.
Right. And by the way, Mike is like obsessed with efficiency. And so
Mm,
we've been working on using AI at work for a while now, and it works pretty
hmm.
good actually. I mean, of course you have like to train your AI and make sure that it
Yeah.
understands what you want it to do. But once it does, I mean, it's a good tool. It can really help being more efficient and quicker also. Let's be honest. Like we can achieve so much more since we use it, but we have to make sure that it like the information is good. I mean, we don't take it for
Hmm.
granted also. So that's where knowing about it and having the knowledge, like you said, helps us using it the right way, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so being a lifelong learner was also one of your top lessons when you chatted with Mike. What type of education did you pursue since besides drawing?
Yeah, besides drawing, I tried to get into programming, learning Python. I took an online course, but I gave up shortly, like halfway through it, because again, it's just hard to find the motivation to do anything. And it was one of those online courses where they don't keep you accountable.
Mm.
Like they say, do one lesson a day, but it's not like you get a cookie if you do that. So I just stopped doing it after a while.
Right. And what is Python programming? I don't know that. What is it
Oh,
about?
it's Python is just a programming language, right? It's like C++ or something. So you can use it to
Okay.
create simple programs, to create games. I wanted to learn it to maybe streamline some of the things I was doing online, or maybe to like gather information more
Hmm.
quickly, and really just to be more technically knowledge. It would also help with blogging as well. There's a lot of things, technical things in the background that I wouldn't have to outsource and hire other people for.
Right.
But yeah, I just got too lazy, and it was easier for me to like go play with the kid, or to go have a snack, and to continue with that.
You needed that cookie.
Yeah, well, I might get back into that course, or I might learn something else. But that's the thing, is like I feel like a kid again
Right.
with this whole retirement thing. Is I'm not accountable for anything
Hmm.
anymore,
Hmm.
like other than my family, but I'm not accountable to a job or to coworkers. So the responsibility just goes down a lot, and with that, my accountability also is pretty much non-existent to anybody. So that's part of the reason why I can do anything I want right now.
Hmm.
But at the same time, like I've mentioned, I just don't feel productive, and that's kind of nagging at me a little bit internally.
Yeah, I guess it's like a good place to be in, but at the same time, it's also dangerous to stay there for too long. Maybe that's the challenge you face right now.
Yeah, it's a very psychological thing, and like I mentioned, this is a problem many people would love to have,
Hmm.
but it's a very personalized problem as well. And there are different issues when you go into retirement that I've heard
Hmm.
other people have, because before quitting work, I did some research into this, and I was asking other people who are already retired, like what were some of your biggest challenges? And this was definitely one of them,
Hmm.
and it's just something I have to work on myself. It's not like the other problem, which I don't have, which is you lack a sense of self because your work was your identity
Hmm.
before, and now that you're not working anymore, you're kind of like this shell of a person, and you have to find something else to do. That was never the case for me, luckily, but I'm dealing with this other thing right now.
Right.
Listeners, I hope you enjoyed the episode so far, but I have to interrupt it a minute. Our goal at Dividend Stocks Rock is to help you invest with more conviction. We know that dividend income is important for you, and this is why we have gathered all you need to know about it in the Dividend Income for Life guide. Right, Mike?
Yes, I have a completely different approach when it comes down to generate dividend income, and I wanted to share my view with that. I wrote a series of DSR fundamental newsletters that were greatly appreciated by our members this year. I received tons of comments, and a lot of them were, Mike, you just came out with some very thought provocative context concepts. And at this point, I really want to change my portfolio and follow this path to a better type of dividend income. So I've did a great review of those DSR fundamentals newsletters, packaged them together, wrote a few more pages of content, and built that dividend income for life.
This guide, as you said, has been highly rated by our DSR members, and we share it for free with you today. To grab your copy, hit pause on your app, visit thedividendguideblog.com/income, and enter your name and email. You'll then receive the email with your download. And also, by the way, it's always a pleasure to hear from you, so please let us know how it helped you. Again, thedividendguideblog.com/income.
Okay, so now let's go into investing for a bit. Did your portfolio change since you left the workforce?
Not too much. I still have the same portfolio roughly that I had before. And in the previous podcast, I was talking with Mike that we shared the same philosophy when it comes to dividend investing,
Mm-hmm.
and you buy dividend growers. So because of that, the theory is like you don't sell those, you just
Right.
keep those dividend growth stocks and they continue to give you increasing income year after year. So that part of my portfolio is the same, still generating a few $1,000s a month. And then on top of that, I've set about 10% of my portfolio for trading. I got into trading options.
Okay.
It's hit or miss. Like I make a few hundred here, a few hundred there, but I think overall I'm not really up or down too much
Mm-hmm.
with that 10% of my portfolio. And in terms of real estate, I've mentioned previously in the previous podcast, I sold my farmland,
Mm-hmm.
and right now I still have the few properties that I do have. And those are generating more income now because it's been a couple of years, but about $3,000 a month in net cash flow. So after mortgage payments, property taxes, and all that. So those haven't really changed. The biggest change to my investment is really, I guess, the option side of it, where I've dedicated now like 10% of my stock portfolio
Mm-hmm.
to that.
So dividends are pretty much like the biggest part of your passive income right now, right?
Yeah, they make up about, I guess, half
Mm-hmm.
or a little bit more than half, depending on some of it is REITs, so those pay a distribution income. But
Right.
yeah, if we count those as dividends as well. Yeah, so those, the nice thing is they're all passive. You don't have to touch it, you don't have to manage that, and the money just rolls in.
That's the best part of it, right?
I just wished it would go up in value like before, whereas now, because I'm withdrawing money out of my account,
Mhm.
the dividend income isn't really increasing anymore. Because of the negative cash flow situation, I did have to sell some stocks. And unfortunately, I sold a little bit of my dividend stocks as well.
Mm, I see. So since you rely on your portfolio for income, do you find yourself spending more time managing it?
Not managing the whole thing, but I am spending more time just managing the option side. In terms of the dividend income, I just mostly leave that as is. And whereas before I would put more money, like after a couple of months, I put more money into my investment account and buy more dividends.
Hmm.
Now I'm not doing that anymore. So if anything, I'm actually less involved in managing my
Right.
dividend portfolio.
Okay. And how does it feel when looking at your portfolio to going from the accumulation phase to decumulation phase? Like, how do you feel about that?
I wasn't used to it at first, and I wasn't a big fan of it because it does hurt a little bit looking at your portfolio going down for the first time, and it just wasn't something that I got used to right away. But over time, I think I've kind of gotten used to it. It's I guess it's sort of similar to like anything where you build a habit of doing or you just get numb to it.
Mm,
So right now I look at my portfolio, and when I withdraw money, I just think, yeah, it's another month. I have to take some money out because we are cash flow negative at the moment.
hmm.
So what I do is I step back and I look at it from the bigger perspective, and I think, okay, even if this continues to go on for another couple of years, that's only going to affect my net worth by maybe like 10 or 20%. So it's not the end of the world.
Hmm.
And again, I'd still be better off I was before. So I kind of look at it that way and I go from there.
Okay, so you've mentioned real estate still being part of your portfolio. However, like we've mentioned also at the beginning of the episode, it seems more complicated a bit than it used to be. So do you have like Any funny stories or lessons learned since 2022?
So living in Vancouver, there's a lot of new construction going on for high-rise condos. And I saw one a couple years ago that I really liked for a pre-sale condo that I wanted to get in on. And part of the reason is because they're offering this rental program where if you can't find a tenant, then they will put a tenant in it for you.
Mm,
And they have a base, like a limit for what the rent is, something like $3,000 a month for a one bedroom. And that's the one I wanted. And it was a pretty high up floor level. So the views were really good.
okay.
But my wife didn't like the idea of buying a new construction, a new pre-sale condo.
Mhm.
So we compromised, and in the end, we just didn't buy it. But so far, yeah, I haven't bought any new real estate since selling the farmland in 2022 or 2020 and buying that new condo before. The thing is, though, because neither of us are working, it's actually very hard to get a mortgage because you need an income
Mhm.
in order to qualify for someone to lend you money. So even if we wanted to get into new real estate now, we might have to sell one of our existing properties and not go off of our income alone.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. So real estate becomes a lot harder once you retire. Of course, it makes sense. I mean, it's something I knew, but I didn't like think about it at first. So it's a good point that you bring, of course.
Yeah, when you're not making an income, actually a lot of things change. Like it's not just real estate, it's
Mm,
any time where you have to borrow money for anything like a car loan. And also not buying new real estate, but when you want to refinance,
mm,
you can't change lenders, right? So if our mortgage comes up for renewal, we have to use the same lender, the same bank, because if we were to go to some other bank, we have to go through all of that vetting process again and show them our income,
right.
which is non-existent, which will get rejected. So that's an issue. I guess it's sort of similar to with like the credit score.
Mhm,
Like the credit score is only useful if you're borrowing money, right? Otherwise, if you can have a lousy credit score, but as long as you're not taking on new debt, then that doesn't really affect you in any way.
mhm.
Besides, I guess like finding a place to rent because some landlords will look at that. But otherwise, yeah, it's kind of like that. An income is only useful for when you're borrowing money.
Sure. But does it feel like you're losing a bit of like negotiating power with your mortgages and all that
Oh yeah,
stuff?
for sure.
Yes.
Yes, definitely. Because like I mentioned, you can't go to another bank, so you have to stick
Mm,
with your current lender. So they have that power where they know you can't leave, so they'll just give you a rate. What I've done is try to make my dividend income and rental income part of my like as income, but the way they calculate it, these lenders, is different for these types of incomes than for like a T4
mm.
for like an employment income. So without an employment income, it's just much harder to get a mortgage.
Right. Which, I mean, to us, it doesn't make sense really because you still have an income. But yeah, I get that the technicalities make it difficult for you.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some like regulations in
Hmm.
there as well and
Probably.
technical stuff that they have to deal with.
And Liquid, do you have any stocks on your buy list right now? I'm like, maybe not since you said that you didn't buy much since you retired, but I'm just curious.
Yeah. Yeah, no, no, not right now. And even if I did have stocks on my buy list, I don't have any money to buy them,
Sure.
so it wouldn't really matter. But in the previous podcast, I was mentioning that the way I look at stocks and how I add them onto my buy list is I look at stocks that are undervalued, right? So a couple years ago, I mentioned the technology sector was
Hmm.
really down in 2022, and it was a good time to buy infotech stocks at that time. Right now, like since then, IT stocks have gone through the roof, and it's gotten to a point where it's too expensive right now.
Hmm.
Even value stocks are not value anymore. So like Costco has an insane PE. It's still a great company,
Hmm.
and I go there to shop with my family, and it's always busy. But it doesn't make sense to me why the price to earnings of essentially a wholesaler like a
Hmm.
brick and mortar store would be so high. So I think everything is expensive right now,
Right.
and I would wait for some kind of market pullback before going back in.
All right, so last question for you today, Liquid. You learned a lot from what rich people do, and many could consider you as part of that group today. So, what could they learn from you?
Well, I guess they can learn from my mistakes and even just to understand that this whole financial thing is a long-term journey. And even if you tried to mitigate any potential disasters or mistakes, it doesn't mean that they're not going to happen to you.
Hmm.
So the best thing to do is to treat it like a journey, like a process, and to not get upset with your money or yourself or people in your life that uses, spends, and saves money with you. It's much like any relationship where the money that you have is, you can think of it as having a relationship with it. And if you don't manage it, if you don't try to look after it, then it will leave you in unexpected ways.
Mm. That's a very interesting way to see it. I like it.
Yeah, yeah, like that's what happened to me in the first year
Hmm.
after quitting work is I neglected my finances, and I paid the price for that, because if I had kept track of my finances meticulously like I've done in the past 14, 15 years,
Hmm.
then I would have caught myself way earlier and say like, oh wow, like my cash flow is really negative this month. Let's see what
Right.
happened and how I can adjust it for next month. But because I waited so long to look at that, and like at the same time, it was very liberating as well. It was very freeing to not have to look at my finances.
Sure.
But yes, you definitely have to keep an eye on those things because it will creep up and hurt you in the long run.
All right, so listeners, if you'd like to learn more about Liquid, he has a YouTube channel called Freedom 35 Blog. Liquid, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, yeah, I think recently I've been spending more time on the YouTube channel trying to just use my experience as a way to teach other people how to navigate the market. I look at stocks, I do technical analysis on different companies, and I do some option trading in there as well, demonstrating what I do in my portfolio and just sharing my experience.
Well, thank you so much for this once again life-changing conversation, Liquid. Like the last time, you give me a lot to think about. Listeners,
Thank you, Vera. Thanks you for having me.
it was a pleasure, honestly. It was very, very nice to meet you. So, listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button underneath our podcast logo and help us grow by sharing it. For the show notes and related content, visit thedividendguideblog.com/214. If you'd like to appear on the show, message me on the Dividend Guy blog Facebook page or at the Dividend Guy on X. And until next week, stay invested.
Fellow investors, it's Mike here. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. Please note that the Dividend Guy blog podcast is at no time issuing buy or sell recommendation. Please do your own due diligence as this podcast is recorded for information and hopefully fun purposes only. Make your research, make sure you do your stuff. We're not responsible for your losses or your profit after listening to this episode. And until next one, stay invested.